And those years robbed me of so much. But on the other hand, John, those years taught me so much. And out of our pain, out of my pain, my husband's pain, our purpose was born. It's hard to explain all that, but it's in my book. And I can tell you right now, if I would not have experienced that, I can't imagine being my age and having any compassion for people if I would not have gone through my own pain and trauma and disappointments.
Hey, Uncommon Leaders, welcome back. This is the Uncommon Leader Podcast, and I'm your host, John Gallagher. Anne Beiler, it's so great to have you as a guest on the Uncommon Leader Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I'm so excited about being here with you today and your audience.
I can't wait to have the conversation. Before we hit the record button, I know there's some fun things we're talking about. I always get nervous about having those conversations because I don't have the B-roll to add it in. I'm like, no, let's not talk about that. That'll be great for the podcast. But it was fun getting a chance to know you before that. I do want to start you out the same way I want to start all first-time guests with the same question. And that's to tell me a story from your childhood that still impacts who you are as a person or as a leader today.
Wow. So, I grew up in the Amish community. And so my childhood was pretty idyllic and I would say very simple, secure. I knew nothing about the real world, but I think what really impacted me, I want to say two things. Number one, my mom and dad we were farmers and poor farmers. And so there was always the need to have a cash crop or something else that would provide cash. And so my mom and dad went to the farmers market in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and we lived in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, which was about 2 hours away. So it was during that time that I feel like something happened in my heart and in my head that I didn't understand at the time, but as I look back, pivotal and very important to who I am today. And that was number one, when my mom and dad would go to market on Thursday, and they would go Friday and Saturday, but my mom would go along on Thursday. I would come home from school, and mom would have a note on the kitchen counter saying Anna Betts, which was, my name was Anna, and her pet name for me was Anna Betts. And she would say, Anna Betts, and here's the list of pies and cakes I want you to make tonight for the farmer's market in the morning, Friday morning. And mom was at market, and I would come home and see this list. And I remember clearly, John, as I read the note from my mom, there were 60 to 70 pies or cakes, and both combination that mom was asking me to bake. I would walk down into my basement. I feel it right now.
Wow.
And I would just, I remember the loneliness because mom wasn't there. That's the only time in my life that my mom was not there. And that went on for about 2 years. And so going down into the basement by myself, my siblings, there are 8 of us kids. I don't know what they were doing, but all 7 of them were out somewhere doing something, either in the field or in the garden or cleaning. I don't know what it was, but I asked them not too long ago, am I telling the story correctly? Did any of you help me bake in the basement? And they all said, are you kidding? No. So it's true. I would walk down those steps very often, wipe the tears from my eyes. And the reason I say this is important to my adult life is because I began to feel the responsibility at a very young age to be productive, to please mom and dad. And then the result of that was mom and dad didn't say, oh, you're amazing, or we love you, or any of those kind of things. But the next morning, I would do all of this by myself, like from scratch, all the pies from scratch, the dough, the everything. And my dad would come down the next morning, and I would help him before I went to school to load up the pies in a pie case. And he would say to me, Anna Betts, these really look nice. And so I would go to market then on Saturday. And my dad would brag about, I don't know about brag, but he would tell everybody that these pies and cakes were made by my daughter. And so I felt the pride from my dad. I felt great satisfaction, but I knew what I learned there was that I never got paid for anything, but my reward was satisfaction. And to get to that reward, I had to persevere. And persevere, my definition of that is very simple. It simply means you do what you don't feel like doing. just keep going. And I learned that at the age of 11 and 12. And the result of that, my dad was just let me know that somehow in by the way he acted and by what he said to the customers, that he was really proud of me, although he never said that. And the other thing I learned there in that market was my dad was a hard worker and he loved people. Now, I didn't know that at the time, but I would go to the market on Saturday with him and he would interact with all the customers. It was a very ethnic group of people in Philadelphia. Back in the day, it was my Amish world and then Philadelphia. And I didn't understand anything about ethnicity or cultures, but I watched my dad interact with all kinds of people. It didn't matter, Black, white, Jewish, it didn't matter. And he would laugh with them, he would talk to them, he would act like they were his friends. And I remember standing by my dad thinking, how can he do this? He doesn't even know these people. But even that, John, impacted me to the point when I grew up and, experienced life and eventually started Auntie Anne's. I remembered my dad. And that's powerful to me. And I think that family of origin that we grow up in really does set us up for life, whether it's good or bad. And in my case, it was so good to be brought up in the Amish culture with parents that loved me and taught me about God and taught me how to work hard and taught me how to love everybody.
Wow. I could go so many different routes with that. I mean, just, as I listen through the things you're talking about, perseverance, hard work, faith, affirmation, and care. And one of the quotes that came to my mind, Maya Angelou's quote about people remember how they made you feel, not necessarily what they said or what you did, but how you made them feel. And he clearly made you feel, to a certain extent, that was his way of sharing his love. What I hear from you there, and that he was able to make you feel loved in that space where you were. My mom is a big fan of Amish country. She's probably more on the Ohio side in terms of where she lives. We grew up in the Northern Panhandle, West Virginia, and she understands that and appreciates that so much, especially the service side of that as well, the customer service side. Now, again, going deeper than that, it's just how you treat people.
Exactly.
And I'm sure you took many of those things to Auntie Anne's as you got started, which that led ultimately this story, and we'll get a chance to go backward into that story, but into your book, we'll get a chance. You wrote, came out last year, Overcome and Lead. So it's really about your story going through. And I gave you a heads up beforehand. I wanted to start before that because you've not been the CEO of Auntie Anne's for a little while. You've got out of the business a while back, and you could have retired, but one of the points or basically checked out, if you will, and it just wasn't in your blood. And one of the points you make right in the book is finish well at the end. We live in a world that needs an uprising of people who are overcoming and becoming. Ironically, finishing well means never really being finished as long as you're alive. As long as there's breath in our lungs, we have influence, a voice, a moment in time that holds the potential for impact. So what have you had going on since you retired from being a CEO of an unbelievably successful company and you are still making an impact?
Well, so yeah, the day we sold the company and the day we settled for Auntie Anne's was a very, very, there was a emotional day, feeling quite accomplished, but also feeling a great loss. When you birth, I want to say, a company and all of the people in it, you're very, very connected to the people there. And I loved our people. And so that in a sense, it was a very good ending for Auntie Anne's, but it was also a very difficult. But I knew even then, even though I didn't know exactly what, but I knew even then I was not finished. There's nothing in my bones, even today, that would feel like I'm finished. And sometimes, when you feel that way, you almost feel a little weird. Like all of my friends, but many of my friends, my family, there was 8 of us kids and 16 with the in-laws, and all of us are still alive and well. We're all now in our late 60s and 70s, all 8 of us. And most of them are still doing little jobs. I mean, they have things to do, but every now and again, somebody asks me, when are you going to quit? And I can't explain that. I really don't have an answer for that because I don't know. But I can tell you, when you're a person of purpose and passion, you can't quit. It's not like you have to keep moving, but something inside of you will keep you going. And so when we sold the company, we bought a 125-acre farm. On that farm, our purpose was then to build a community center, a service that we could provide to our community, to them in the area and also beyond the area. Counseling center. We had a church there. We had a cafe. We had a daycare. So it was a 55,000 square foot building. So from Auntie Anne's, we went into that. We began to feel the passion for the community, and we wanted to serve people who were less fortunate emotionally, spiritually, or financially. And that was always a part of who we were at Auntie Anne's. So we just took what we were and what we had into this next season of our lives. And that's when I began to understand I need to write a book. And that's when I wrote our first book in 2008 or 9, called Twist of Faith. And that's our memoir, which is timeless. It's our whole story. It's more than you probably want to know, but it's a whole story. And I began to realize then that, wow, there's a whole lot more that I can do. And Auntie Anne's, although it was life-giving, I mean, it was an amazing journey, I began to almost feel like, wow, I couldn't do this if I was still part of Auntie Anne's. So when we sold the company, it actually gave me freedom to continue in the purpose that I knew God had for us. And that was to help marriages, and then eventually write a book, and then going into public speaking. And that has been pretty much my life since then. It's been a journey and a joy.
Taking a note there just for 1 second. So I love that. I mean, again, and I shared a story with you beforehand. A gentleman I knew that, he retired, and he had been writing for years, a newsletter every Friday, and he retired and stopped. I'm like, no. You have to write more now. You have to get the opportunity to continue to share too many stories of individuals who decide to retire, and at that point they stop, adding value. And really, one of the things that we learn, and I'm sure you've done this through both of your books and now your cookbook that's coming out, I want to talk about that just a little bit as well, is understand that it is more powerful for you to kind of help that person that you used to be with some of the words that you wrote. And so when folks read your stories, I believe they hear that in terms of how you've overcome and the things that you've overcome to be successful, to be able to lead. As you said in the story, you didn't have the degree and the big college, Harvard MBA or whatever it was that many people who run successful businesses would say that you need, but you had to overcome many of those things. I want to touch on just a quote you had on there, because I think it's more about you than it is the business, but you said, "Out of our pain, our purpose can be born." Is that something that you experienced in terms of going through, and how you ended up, being successful with Auntie Anne's and being successful as a writer and as a speaker as well?
Of course, at the time, I would never have known that, but hindsight is 2020, and I clearly see out of our pain, our purpose was born. Because I think that, and part of our pain was our 19-month-old daughter was killed accidentally and killed instantly when she was, we were young married. I was 27 at the time, and soon after that, and that in itself it changed everything about me. It changed the way I felt about the world. It changed I almost lost my faith, although it was strong and it was really tight inside of me, but it started to begin to almost unravel. And then soon after that, my pastor came to me and invited me to his office. And when I got there, I was relieved, because I'm like, wow, okay, I can actually talk to somebody about my grief, which I really tried to isolate myself. I didn't want anyone to know how bad I was feeling. And so before I left his office, he took advantage of me physically. And I knew nothing about abuse of any kind. And I walked out the office door, and I stood there for a little moment, and I thought, wow, okay, we lost Angie. My life is in a crazy place right now, just so much grief. I don't know what to do with this, but one thing I do know, I have to keep this a secret. And
Mm.
so what I really talk about quite a bit today is that whether it's a business setting or a church setting, it doesn't matter to me. I want people to know that secrets will actually kill you. They keep you from becoming who you need to become. And that day, standing there outside of his office, I decided to keep a secret because I felt like it was the only choice I had to make. And who would I talk to? Who would understand? Who would believe me? It was my pastor. And that one secret then kept me in the world of abuse for nearly 7 years. And I call it the dark world of abuse of every kind. I lost myself. We had 2 daughters at that time. I was an absent mother. I was there physically, but emotionally abandoned my children for all those years because I was trying to survive. And so I tell that part of my story, John, because so many people that I know today, as I go out and I speak, um, countless people come to me, and I know that they have never been able to resolve the pain or disappointment or the trauma in their life. And so I tell that story even to your listeners, to anyone who's listening right now, to just let people know, let you know, it matters where you're at in life, but I can tell you that you can overcome. It sounds almost like a fairy tale, I guess, but I'm telling you, you can overcome it all. And how do you overcome it all? Well, it's a journey, but it starts with a choice, another choice that I made. The one choice took me into the dark world. 7 years later, I made another choice. And that choice I made to tell my husband my deep, dark secret that I thought was mine to keep. I would go with it, with the grave, to my grave with his secret because it was too bad and too evil. And but I made a choice that day, and there's a whole story. It's in my book about going to tell my husband my secret. And obviously, my husband and I were married now. It'll be 56 years in September.
Wow.
It's amazing to me. It's amazing only because I know my story. Okay, I'm just saying. I know my story, and I know how hard it's been. And those years robbed me of so much. But on the other hand, John, those years taught me so much. And out of our pain, out of my pain, my husband's pain, our purpose was born. It's hard to explain all that, but it's in my book. And I can tell you right now, if I would not have experienced that, I can't imagine being my age and having any compassion for people if I would not have gone through my own pain and trauma and disappointments. But I can tell you, wherever you're at right now, somewhere of maybe you're in the middle of horrific disappointments. Maybe you've made bad choices, but it's within your power. It's truly within your power to make good choices. And my line is, the choice you make today is the life that you will live tomorrow. Mm. I didn't know that then, but I'm telling you today, it's true. We can begin to make good choices. As hard as it sounds and as difficult as it may be, we can actually begin to make good choices. So making one good choice to tell my husband my secret. Wow, I thought he would divorce me. I truly believed that he would tell me to leave. Here I am telling my story because of the power of grace of God and the power of one really good man in my life, my husband. I'm humbled that I can sit here today and tell that story and to tell your listeners, don't give up. And I can tell you one thing right now, if I would never have told Jonas my secret, there would be no Auntie Anne's. I can't even imagine a world without Auntie Anne's. But I came that close to giving up on me, almost through suicide, almost gave up on myself.
Wow.
And that's why I can tell your listeners, you can pick yourself up and begin to make good choices. And the number one choice that you need to make right now is that you will go and tell somebody what's going on in your life. Your thought, your hurts, your pain, your disappointments, you may even call it sin. You may have betrayed. I don't know what it is. It's hard. It's rough. It's tough. But you can still find someone that you can talk to. And to me, that is almost the only answer out. For me, it was the only answer out. And as I did that, then life began to unfold. The shackles began to fall, but it was still very, very difficult to go from
Had to be
there
very difficult.
to where I'm at right
Had
now.
to be.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, it goes back to that story, but the story of, you are, perfectly positioned today to help that person that you used to be. And you mentioned that in your work that you do now. So you talked about being a writer of books. You talked about being a speaker, but you also talked about, you used the term help marriages as well. So is there a story that you has been especially impactful on you after that you've been able to help someone without taking into account anybody's confidentiality, but I mean that you've been so happy that you've been able to help with what
Oh,
you've done since you retired?
it started at Auntie Anne's. I mean, we had a number of employees at that time, and the rules are the rules. You got to live by the rules. As far as we all have our standards and our values and our culture within our companies. And I love to tell these stories, not naming names, but just to let employers and owners of companies know that you are an influential person. That's why you own a company. It's not about the perks. It's not about how amazing you are as the boss or the founder, but it's really about serving your people. And I think what I discovered, without the pain that I would have experienced, I would have been, let me tell you, I would have been a hard-nosed boss. There's no doubt about it. But because what I experienced, it made me great. It made me feel gracious, compassionate to our employees. And a number of times we had employees that, things happened in the workplace, and we had some employees that had affairs in the company. And as we met with the team, I'm like, come on, guys, they're great people. They've contributed to Auntie Anne's. I mean, they've been here for a number of years. Are we just going to say goodbye? I'll see you later. Or can we bring restoration? And I'm happy to tell you that I think that's the influence and I feel like that's good leadership. Knowing, the things that happen in the workplace, it's hard stuff. And as a leader, I think we're called to be compassionate, but also firm. You can be firm and compassionate at the same time. And so we gathered people together, and we came up with some solutions and resolutions that worked. And so again, if I would not have experienced all that myself, I would have fired these people in a New York minute. But I feel like as leaders in business that we're there to serve people and to take them to another level in their lives, emotionally, spiritually, financially, in whatever way that we can. And that to me is the role of a good leader.
I agree. Compassion. It's something that is lacking, no doubt. And you're right. There are rules, and there are, pirates in there that must play and understand guidelines when you have to care for somebody. Right. And you talked about that a little bit more in your book as well. But your story and taking a chance on others as well is often worth the risk. Sometimes it isn't, and we learn that pretty quickly, and we need to make changes as a leader, but sometimes it is. And your story as well, in terms of your daughter, and then the experience that you had with the pastor, as you said, had to test your faith. So how were you able to overcome that and still remain strong in your faith?
You're asking some very good questions. And I know we have 30 minutes, maybe 2 minutes right now.
Yeah, right. Exactly. We're at 22. Yeah.
Well, again, I have to go back to my foundation. My parents taught me about God and faith and the importance of it in our lives. And during those years of disappointment and just downright abuse and complete hopelessness and to the point of suicide, I guess what I did mostly was cry and pray, because I felt like it was the end of, I could not believe I'm in this place. I hated who I had become. I couldn't believe this little Amish girl that was innocent about life and didn't know anything about the world. I mean, I wasn't perfect, but I don't mean that, but I had no information, no experience with evil and darkness. And So when those things began to happen, as I began to work through all those things, again, I cried a lot and I prayed a lot. I often said my 7 years of darkness, it's like I wrestled with God for 7 years because he wouldn't let me go. And that's the truth. He wouldn't let me go. I wanted to let go. I wanted to just throw the towel in and leave Jonas and my family. That's what I wanted to do in the moment. There are easy and quick solutions to our problems, but if it's easy, it's probably not the right thing to do. So I did the hard thing. I didn't want to, but I did the hard thing by staying and by trying to just continue to put one foot in front of the other and keep moving forward. And I am grateful for Auntie Anne's because I know that Auntie Anne's really, during those, all my trauma happened before Auntie Anne's, but I carried a lot of that with me into the workplace. And I know that it was heavy for me because I carried a lot of guilt and a lot of shame. But even then, a number of years later, I'm still crying a lot and praying. Like, you just got to get me through the day. So I'm grateful for Auntie Anne's because I really feel like the purpose that we had with Auntie Anne's, the purpose was to be profitable so we'd be charitable. So we had a purpose that was greater than my pain. And number two, purpose was to be light in the world of business. So I think it's really important to have a purpose in spite of the pain and the disappointment and the trauma that you've experienced. Out of that, hopefully you will find your purpose. And we find our purpose through Auntie Anne. So getting up every morning, going to work and being responsible, being a leader of a huge organization that went around the world, I couldn't stay in bed. I had to get up and go. And so I feel like it was a gift to me in that way. So I did stay busy. And then when I came home, I would fall apart and pray and cry again. So for many years, but I'm grateful that Auntie Anne's, I almost want to say Auntie Anne's kept me alive.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, it sounds as though Auntie Anne's was therapy for you to
It
be
really
where you
was.
are today. Absolutely. And that the role that you were in didn't provide you the opportunity to or maybe it did provide you a distraction that you needed in that time of life that was
Yeah.
there more than the purpose, although the value and the purpose of Auntie Anne, and we could dive into that for a long time. But you're right. We keep asking good questions and we miss our time. So as we go forward, but I appreciate you sharing that because I think that's easily stories that we have. It's overcoming the grief, it's overcoming the story, but it's also overcoming and still believing and having faith that there was a
Absolutely.
reason all these things happen that prepared you, and God had already written that story. Okay, let's give you an easy one then. So I've read through the front of your book with the endorsements and things like that, and you had some pretty powerful authors that are in there. Were there any specific? You mentioned personal development was important to you on your journey to Auntie Anne's and other spaces. Were there any specific authors or leaders that you uh, went to in terms of influences on your writing style, on your leadership, or maybe someone you tried to emulate in your leadership?
I'm not sure about that, but I do know at one point when I began to realize, when I understood that I'm not a manager, I'm a leader, and that's I write about that I think in the book as well.
Mhm.
Really important to know which one are you? It's not lesser or it's equal in value, but it's important to know which one that we are. Am I a manager or I'm a leader? And I always felt like I was a manager. So when I understood that it became very clear to me, I am not a manager. Although I thought I'm a diehard little Amish girl that wants to do everything. When I had to shift from doing to being, I want to say that a leader is an influencer and is more about being than it's
Mhm.
about, although you will do whatever it takes to get the job done as well. So, but I think at that time when I shifted from management to leadership, I began to understand the responsibility of leadership. And so then I followed John Maxwell quite a bit in his books, and we had him do an Auntie Anne convention at one point, and um, and that's where I began to develop my leadership through mostly reading, because honestly, I didn't have time. I know it sounds, I mean, in today's world, they would say you have to take the time, but I just didn't have time to spend a lot of time with people that had been down the road further than me. but books became my great friend, my companion. I mean, I read all the time on travels, in my travels on the planes, all the time on leadership, because I knew if I was going to be who God wanted me to be, then I had to learn who I was or who he called me to be. And I did that mainly through reading books. And John Maxwell was one of the great, but then there was also many other books that I read during that time. And yeah, people came into my life. And I think at that time I had a really good pastor that really helped me develop my gift and my talents, whatever that was at the time. I didn't know what that was, but he helped me understand what my gifts and talents were. So yes, people along the way.
You were an encourager and an influencer.
Yeah, that's right. And I had no idea. And I was 48 at the time. I had no idea. So I think that when you find yourself in a role, you may not understand who you are. Maybe you have this vision and this, I want to be an entrepreneur, but I mean, I hate to break it to you, but you may not even know who you are at the very beginning of your company. But once you discover that, embrace who you are, whether it's management or leadership, and then find the people around you that can add to your team, whether it's if you need a leader for your company or you're looking for managers. It's vital to the health of your company, and it's also important to the growth of your company, because if you have the wrong people in the wrong places, let me tell you, and we did sometimes, it creates such frustration. But when you have the right people in the right position, it becomes like a well-oiled machine, not without its challenges, but everybody is in the right place using their gifts and talents. And let me tell you, when you find that, the sky is truly the limit. We went around the world with great people who knew what their role was. And I'm forever grateful. And I can tell you, I'm not the perfect leader. Ask my employees. They would be happy to tell you that. But I found people that were willing to come to our company. And these people then, they became passionate about our purpose. And they became passionate about our purpose simply, I feel like, because we cared about them. And if you care for your people, I believe they will care for your purpose. And these people, all of the employees at Auntie Anne's, whether they were there a year or 15 years, some are still there. They carried the Auntie Anne model around the world. I could never have, it's never been about me. It's been about the people. And I'm glad that I know that. People are your greatest gift and your greatest asset.
Overcome and Lead is a book that folks could read and learn about some of those compassionate stories that Auntie Anne's had to help their employees go through the times that they had, and to get the level of commitment that you had. You mentioned putting people in the right places. Now you're talking Jim Collins in the right seats on the bus to make sure the organization can be successful over the long period, which is very important as well. Auntie Anne, you've written a memoir, you've now written your leadership book, and you have a cookbook that's out there. Which one was harder to do?
Well, you missed the one book, which was Secret Lies Within. I've written 3 books and a couple of storybook as well, and we've done some online leadership courses, all of that. But I can tell you the hardest one I did was The Secret Lies Within, because that had to do with overcoming myself. And I wanted to be raw and real and redemptive with that story, to help people understand that, yeah, you may be here today, but you can become more. You can overcome. And in order to overcome yourself, you have to, in order to move on, you have to overcome yourself. And I called it the overcoming yourself is the internal life of who you are. It's the inside of you. The outside of you is pretty easy to craft that life. People pat you on the back and they say, you're amazing, you're amazing, you're amazing. And after a while, you're like, maybe I'm amazing. I don't know. But the internal life is what we have to, that's where what we have to pay attention to. Who am I on the, and as we learn to do that, I really feel like we can then we open ourselves up then to become the leaders that God really created us to be. And it's a beautiful thing. Then we learn what it means to serve your people and to lead them in ways that will benefit them as well as it benefits us.
So great. Auntie Anne, how do folks connect with you? Where do they find out more about you?
I'll just go on my website, Auntie Anne Beiler, and you'll find all kinds of things out about me, maybe more than what you want to know, but there you can follow me. I'll let you know where I'm speaking and where I'm at. And hopefully when I come to your area, maybe I can meet some of your folks.
That would be great. Auntie, and I appreciate you sharing the time with the listeners of the Uncommon Leader podcast today. I'll put the link to your website in the show notes. I only have one more question for you as I've run over on my time. I see that on my clock over here, but I got to finish you up the same way that I finished my other first time guests.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give you a billboard, and you can put that billboard anywhere you want to. What's the message that you put on that billboard, and why do you put that message on there?
I'm struggling with that one, John. So there's two of them. One is find your purpose and give it to the world. The other one is secrets lie. Truth frees you to become the person to be who God created you to be. Powerful. You can choose
Secrets
which one.
lie. Love that. Just got the chance to see Zach Williams recently in concert. Fear is a liar, but secrets lie. No doubt about that.
Love him. Love him. Yeah.
So, Auntie Anne, again, I appreciate you investing the time with the listeners of the Uncommon Leader podcast today. I wish you the best as you continue to be on your journey of developing yourself, of helping others with their marriages, and I don't know, writing and speaking. I look forward to seeing you in the future as well.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Thank you, John.